All right, hi everybody. I am going to go through a couple more examples of logic tables, or truth tables, sorry, with you just because I know it's a little bit tricky to get the hang of. And in the video for the lesson, it was a pretty simplistic version of this. And I know that I need you to be capable of doing more difficult ones, okay? So this separate video is going to go in depth about truth tables. So if we look across the top, I wrote what we are trying to create a truth table for. Remember, this is read P or the quantity of not Q and R. All right? So let's first start by identifying the different statements that we have. We have a P, a Q, an R, and then we also have a not Q. So let's start by labeling those. So let's put a P, Q, R, not Q, and then the other two things that we're going to have, since we have a parentheses, that becomes one of our columns. So I'm going to write not Q and R in the next column. And then the very last column is always what you are trying to get to. So in this case, it's P or quantity of not Q and R. Alright, so that's what our final column will be. So just like before, we are going to try to come up with all of the possible combinations for P, Q, and R. So we could say that all three of them are true. We could say that P is true, Q is false, and R is true. Or we could have P is true, Q is true, or R is false. We could also have P be true. We could have Q be false and R be false. There's as many combinations as I can think of for having P be true. So now I'm going to say P is false, and if P is false, let's say the Q and R are true. And then if P is false, Q could also be false, but R could be true. And then another combination would be if I have a false and then R is false, and I say that Q is true. And then my very last one, they are all false. Okay? So there's my true-false options for having P, Q, and R. Now, in order to make my not Q, all I have to do is look over here and write the opposite of what I have written in the Q column. So I can say, whenever there's a T in Q, that becomes a false over in not Q. And then whenever there is a false in the Q column, I just put a T in the not Q column. So now I have all of the information I need in order to finish solving for the next column. So now if I look, I have the column heading not Q and R. So remember, with an and, the only way you get a true is if you have a true plus a true. Okay? So now let's look at our not Q and R. So the first one we have a false and we have a true. So that means this is false. In the next one we have a true and a true. So that becomes true. Then we have a false false. That stays false. We have a false true. That stays false. We have a true false. That's false. We have a true true. So there's another true. And then we have false false, which becomes false. And we have a false true, which is false. Alright, now we have the information we need in order to finish solving this problem. Because for this last column, we need the P column. So if I look over far left, I need that information. And I need the information in this column. and I'm going to take those two columns, and if I look, I'm looking for an OR, okay? So that means I only need one true in order to be true in the final column. So here I have a true and a false. That's going to be true. Sorry, I'll try to stay with my color coding. And then I have a true and a true, so that's also true. And then I have a true and a false. Since it's OR, I only need one true. And I have a true and a false. True. I have a false and a false. So there's my first false. I have a false and a true. So that is also false. And then I have a false and a true. So that is true because it's an OR. So false and true is true. Then I have a false and a false, so that is false. I have a false and a false, so that also is false. So that's how I would do that slightly more complicated truth table. Let's see if we can take it up one more notch. If I look, I have a P, a Q, and an R. So again, I'm going to have the same information as the last table. So I'm going to write in my statements. So I have P, I have Q, and I have R. So they could all be true. It could be true, false, true. It could be true, true, false. It could be true, false, false. It could be false, true, true, false, false, true, false, true, false, and it could be false, false, false. Okay? Now, the other ones that I need to write, I have this parentheses, I have this parentheses, and then I have the whole thing. So I'm going to write P and Q. I'm going to write Q and R, and then I'm going to just draw an arrow because I don't have enough room to write that entire thing. But it's the whole problem is going into that column. So let's start with the P and Q. So remember, with an and, the only time it's going to be true is if they are both true. So I look at my P column and my Q column. The first row, they are both true, so that is true. Here I have a true, false, so that's false. I have a true, true, so that is true. And then I have a true, false, so that's false. False, true, false, false, false is false. A false, true is false. And a false, false, again, is false. Next, I look at Q and R, so that means I'm going to be looking at this column and this column. And again, the only time I'm going to get a true is if I have two trues. So sometimes it's easier to go through and look for where you have two trues. So I see I have a true here, and I have a true, true here. And those are the only two true truths I see, so that I can go in and I can just fill everything else in with a false. Now, I want to look at this red column and this red column, and using an OR statement, so I only need one true in order to make it true, I'm going to fill in my last column. I have a true, true, so that's always true. False, false is always false. And then since it's an OR, this true, false is true. I have a false, false, so that's false. False, true is true with an OR. False, false is false. False, false, and false, false. So that would be the final answer for this truth table. I hope this video was helpful. Have a great day.